Today I've never felt better about myself and where I am in life because I've eliminated everything that's not working on cars or motorcycles, and that's truly what makes me happy.
If there's anyone like a car show celebrity, his name would be Jesse James. While James is popular for his role in the show Monster Garage, he's been in a lot more shows than he can probably count. Okay, maybe he can count them, but we had a hard time counting them. We know that one of his first forays into the world of television was a show called Motorcycle Mania that chronicled his whole life. And we also know that the show is produced by the Discovery Channel. It was after the success of that show that Discovery Channel decided to produce another show called Monster Garage. After his success with Monster Garage, James decided that he could create his shows, so he decided to establish Payupsucker Productions, under which he produced shows like History of the Chopper, Iraq Confidential with Jesse James, and Green Scream. These are a lot of shows, right? Well, here's the thing no one knows. It's the fact that Jesse James created one more show called Jesse James Presents Austin Speed Shop.
The place is called Austin Speed Shop. It's just a custom car shop, you know, we specialize in like old style craftsmanship and stuff that's timeless.
The Austin Car Shop series was a part of his How To series, which was a series where he tried to teach people how to fix cars. But that's not the only interesting thing about this show. Another thing that nobody knows is the fact that the series had only 3 episodes and had only 1 season. Aside from that, the show has never been aired on cable television and has never been available to stream, rent, or buy. It's a Jesse James classic that has never been seen on mainstream television and has absolutely no popularity. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. That's what makes this show and its ending so interesting, because it gives us an insight into how Jesse James works. The Austin Speed Shop show wasn't just named arbitrarily. The show was actually based on Austin Speed Shop, a car shop in Austin, Texas that James used to work at. So what happened to the Austin Speed Shop show? Why does it only have 1 season and 3 episodes? Why didn't Jesse James continue with it? Before we can understand the drama behind the Austin Speed Shop show, it's important to know what the show is about. Once we understand what the show is about, it would be easier to understand why it didn't make it past the first season. Jesse James Presents Austin Speed Shop was the first installment of Jesse James' highly anticipated How To series. As the name of the series implies, it was created to show people how Jesse James worked on different parts of a vehicle. The Austin Speed Shop show had 3 episodes, and the 3 episodes were about an hour long each. The first episode of the show was shot in documentary format and was essentially just an introduction to the Austin Speed Shop. In the episode, James went on about showing us around the Austin Speed Shop and how the operations of the shop. After that, he went around the shop and took 2 bright-eyed builders under his wing and taught them how to make one-of-a-kind headers for his 32 Ford Roadster. Throughout the hour, Jesse shared his mad fabricating skills and gave his viewers inside access to his beloved city and the new shop he calls home. The second episode of the show was titled Jesse James Presents Austin Speed Shop Fenders. As the title of the show implies, this episode was about fenders and how Jesse James made them. In the show, James the Master Fabricator shared his incredible craftsmanship as he demonstrated the art of making fenders. It was obvious that the project was especially meaningful to James because his skill at making fenders was precisely the reason he got to the top of the motorcycle building world.
Once came up with a product, which was the fenders, and started making them, then when money started coming in, then it all of a sudden made sense to everyone and helped my business grow.
The third episode of the show, or the third volume, since that's what James called it, focused a little bit more on bomber seats and how to make them. In the volume, he took his viewers through mid-century craftsmanship and showed the guys from Austin Speed Shop how to make and rivet a bomber-style seat. Jesse's commitment to perfection was highlighted in the film as he worked night and day to get all the details of the craft right. While there's a lot that could be said for the quality of Austin Speed Shop, it is clear that Jesse James cared a lot about the show. But here's the thing, caring for something doesn't make it great, or even good. Maybe the Austin Speed Shop might have been better with a big budget company like Discovery Channel running the show behind the scenes, but from the first shots of the show, it's clear that this is all James. And boy, did it come crashing down. While the series has now been pulled from whatever distribution channel marketed it, its impact online can be seen in the awful ratings it's gotten. For example, the show has a 5 out of 10 rating on IMDb, and only about 8 people saw it to give it that review. In short, Jesse James Presents Austin Speed Shop was a pretty magnificent failure. The shop failed so spectacularly that James doesn't even speak of it anymore. That's right, the show has even been scrubbed from his Wikipedia page, which does take some doing. But this doesn't mean that Jesse James is a failure. If we're being fair, James has been one of the most successful personalities on car show television, and that does take some doing, especially when one considers his background. When James was just a teenager, he suffered 2 horrific injuries that made him abandon his American football career and focus on work. He didn't have an option to go to college, so he immediately started searching for jobs. After a while, he got a job as a bouncer, and then he became a bodyguard for characters such as Glenn Allen Anzalone and Slayer, a thrash metal band. By 1992, he'd gotten tired of working with others, so he decided to open a repair shop right there in his mother's garage. Before too long, Jesse had managed to build that small garage from a lonely pit stop in his mother's garage to a huge business that would make him a millionaire. That shop was now called the West Coast Choppers. The speed of Jesse's accomplishments is perhaps the most surprising thing in his story. Just 8 years after establishing the West Coast Choppers, he was already speaking to the Discovery Channel about a show, which he landed. In any case, around the early 2000s, Jesse realized that while he may be great at building cars and repairing them, he was even better at building cars, repairing them, and talking about it on television to thousands of people. So, he decided to optimize that part of his craft. After starring in 2 shows for Discovery Channel, James decided to branch out on his own and make his shows. To do that, he created Payupsucker Productions, which is kind of an odd name to give a production company, but it is what it is. In any case, Jesse tried producing some of his shows himself. While some of the shows made under that company, like History of the Chopper, were mildly successful, others were not successful at all. And one of those was Jesse James Presents Austin Speed Shop. Austin Speed Shop was such a failure that even James decided not to go further with the project. The smart thing that Jesse James did, though, was to keep taking jobs from other studios than his own. Even after creating his own company, he was still courted by Discovery and made an appearance on their show, Sons of the Guns. After that, he even went on to appear on The Celebrity Apprentice. Interestingly, James' experience on The Celebrity Apprentice could tell us a little bit more about why his Austin Speed Shop failed. So here's the thing. It appeared that James can be quite proud. On The Celebrity Apprentice, each celebrity played to raise money for a favorite charity. James was selected to play for the Long Beach Education Foundation. However, because he couldn't raise funds, he was eliminated by Donald Trump on the second to last show, which made him place 3rd. Now, this wasn't the most interesting thing about his time on The Apprentice. The interesting thing is that James could have raised the money had he chosen to contact his wife to help him along since she had deep pockets. However, James proved quite stubborn as he didn't budge or ask his wife for help. This tells us that James can be quite stubborn even when it comes to advancing his career. If he says he doesn't want something done, then it's never going to be done. There's really no 2 ways about it with him. His Celebrity Apprentice show wasn't the last we saw of James on TV. He also went on to star in his Jesse James is a Dead Man, which was thankfully better produced than Austin Speed Shop. In fact, the first episode of the show set a rating record for Spike TV, the network it was aired on, drawing the largest audience ever for an unscripted series on the network with 2 million viewers. After that show, he's gone on to appear in Sons of Guns, Street Customs, and even American Chopper, proving to the world that if there's a multiverse of car shows, Jesse James is Doctor Strange.